I'm going to pass it over to both Dave Thomas from SFE Venture Labs, an accelerator here in town, plus Rocket Builders, Lesley Duncan, who used to be at SFE Venture Labs and is now at a quantum company called Photonic. And Lesley also was in the competition many years ago.
You can add another many.
Yeah.
You don't need that many minis.
One many. So has a good perspective around both sides of things. And the topic is product market fit, which you need if you're going to be successful. So I'm going to pass it over to our great speakers. So over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Angie. We have two microphones, or? Okay, great, thank you very much. One of the things I'd like to do is just get a bit of an idea of who's in the audience. I see, who's a mentor? I see a couple people who are mentors. Okay, so you're allowed to hound these two gentlemen all day. Okay, it's good to see Chang and Rob with us, that's great. Anyways, how many of you have an ICT company? IT, internet? Okay, AI? All right, life sciences? Cool. Clean tech? Robotics or advanced technology? Okay, you're allowed to vote more than once, and I've seen people do that. That's a good thing. Okay, so there we are. It's, yeah. Great. So we're going to talk about product market fit today, and one of the reasons we're going to do that is that if you have a concept and you're going, I'm going to go to an event like Web Summit, you can come here, I'm going to learn something, it'll be really interesting, I'll meet people and other things. But at the same time, one of the goals you should have is to understand how your product is going to fit into the marketplace. And if you are entering into the New Ventures BC competition, that's actually a really important piece to it, is how does it all fit in terms of where do things go in the marketplace. And I want to spend a fair bit of time talking about product market fit. So if we could go to the next one. I'm Dave Thomas. This is how you can reach me. I've been a consultant for a number of years. I'm part of Rocket Builders. I'm also the program director of Venture Labs. I've been a mentor and a judge at New Ventures BC for over a decade. And I've been part of this type of event, which is educational, for a long time. I'll let Lesley reintroduce herself when she comes up to talk. She's with one of the neatest companies I've ever seen, but that's beside the point. And then just to talk to, well, maybe we'll come back. Actually, Lesley, you come up and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am Lesley Duncan. As Angie said, I've been a part of the competition, so I had a company that I was a co-founder of in the fintech space. I've worked at Venture Labs, helping a lot of companies figure out their product market fit. My background before that was social psychology, so I did a lot of learning how to do research, learning how to figure out how people think and ask them questions about it the right way. I then worked in a market research company, so I did that professionally, and now I'm working in marketing for a quantum computing company. So sort of seeing all sides of figuring out what people think, what they need, how to ask them questions about it, and how to figure out what you need to do with that information.
So could I buy one of your quantum computers?
No.
Okay, so you're still doing product market fit?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Also, you don't have the money.
Oh, well, I know. Thank you. And how many people at Photonic?
150.
Okay, so this is going to be a big computer. All righty. Let's go to the next one if we could. So as I said, I'm a mentor in residence, part of the go-to-market program that Rocket Builders does for more mature companies. Run that every year. We also have a sales program, which is sales coaching for mature companies who are really trying to grow in the marketplace. And I've done a total of 6 startups, 4 failures, 1 really successful and 1 which is sort of successful. So the ratio is sort of somewhat normal, if you want to call it. And you'll learn a whole bunch. I'll tell you, failure teaches you a ton. So it's one of those things that's really helpful. If we go to the next one of the most important things, okay, how many of you know how to sail? All right, this is better than normal. Okay, the rest of you are missing out. Okay, so I run the sailing school at the Jericho Sailing Center with a couple partners. I've been doing this for over 20 years. We've taught 30,000 kids how to sail. So one of the things that we find interesting is that you can do all sorts of different things in the marketplace. The other thing, here's a question: how many people register manually at Max Sailing, and how many people register online? How many people? How many people think that we register half the people manually, or half or more? 25% or more, 10% or more manually. They come down and fill out a form. How about zero? The answer is zero. We have not taken a manual registration in 3 years, except for one very nice little grandma who comes down, and I personally feed the information into the computer. And that sort of thing. So we are an exercise in digital marketing for an analog business, something which is normal stuff where people show up and it's all about face-to-face. The marketing that we do is based on modern day. So I'd like to talk a bit about round two, because that's one of the key things that is important for everybody. How many are you entering New Ventures BC? Okay, how many are still haven't decided? Okay, you got to do it, guys. Like, this is the time to, make the move. All right. So I think it's an important thing for everybody to do. The big thing here is that, one of the key things that people use or enter with is a business model canvas, short video, and then baseline information about your company. There are 4 significant topics in that baseline info. 3 of them are about the market. Only 1 of them is about your product. And this is an important thing. So this is not my product's the best product competition. It's my business is the one that's most likely to succeed, and a very good business competition. So it's set up that way to do a number of different things. If you're on the jury, you don't like reading stuff which goes all the way out to the margins and covers the whole paper. Okay, that's not the idea. It's be concise, answer the questions, and do it in a very efficient manner. How many of you have seen the business model canvas? I think most everybody has, all right? Really simple way to do things, and we encourage everybody to start working on that. And how many of you have updated your business model canvas in the last 2 months? Okay, you guys get gold stars, all right? It's one of the most important things to do is to keep that piece of information current. And that's something that we really like to do. So, in my opinion, the most important question you're trying to answer there, and actually one of the questions which is really important for most companies, is it's relatively complex, but it's how will you win in the marketplace? It's not more than just the product. It's got a whole bunch of different things in it. And you can't just say, oh, here's my product, here's the market. You have to show how they're going to go and intersect. You have to say, how do I go into the market, and how do things do? And how do things work? So the other thing that quite often people will do is they'll do a financial projection. How many of you like curves that go like this? They start at the bottom left and go up to the right. Everybody likes that. It's really interesting. I taught for a while at one of the universities in an entrepreneurism class, and every single student group had a curve like this. And every single one of them was going to be amongst the most successful tech companies in the history of the province of British Columbia, which also meant that it was really just neat linear algebra. It's way better if you can explain, I'm going to sell X for Y dollars and a few other things like that, and be realistic, because that is what's really expected. If you are, oops, I think we've lost some. Oh. Aha, that's my fault. Okay, not sure how you're going to answer a question. It's really easy to say this is a work in progress. Let's say you're still doing market research. Say we're in the process of doing market research, and that we're interested in understanding where we're going to end up and some of the different things that are important as we go along. And a lot of the different things that you don't know, you can acknowledge that in your submission. And if you aren't sure what you don't know, go to the business model canvas, and where you have very little information in one of the boxes, then it tells you there's something you don't know. And if you're really just starting out, in a business model canvas, the bottom 2 squares at the bottom are about revenue and sales. So you don't start there, you always do that last. If you say, I'm not sure yet, that's very acceptable if you're a really early stage company. One of the issues a lot of you'll have is getting down to 5 pages. So make the assumption in New Ventures BC competition, you have a very sophisticated audience. Like, they've been around, they've done this a lot. You don't need to explain to them what COVID was, they know. You don't need to explain a lot of simple stuff. They already know that. You don't need to explain the market in amazing detail. So one of the things we do see a lot of the time is people will talk about the market for 3 pages, but almost not talk about their company and what it's going to do at all. And it's actually important to talk about your company more than the problem. You acknowledge the problem, but talk about what your company does and what's important. Success. So massive market. You know, let's say you're going to change the airline industry, which would be good because a lot of them are going to go bankrupt, especially in the United States. We all seem to know why. And there will be issues in the industry. The fact that it's massive doesn't matter. It's how am I going to get into that market and what am I going to do? Mostly at the beginning, because if you don't get market entry right, you don't get to have year 5 in your projections. It takes a little while to do that. Quick question, how many of, we'll talk about AI. So a bunch of you, how many of you have a pure AI company? Okay, you got AI company, all right. How many of you, artificial intelligence is part of my product? Okay, good, that's excellent. How many of you used AI to draft my submission to the New Ventures BC competition? Okay, when in doubt, do it, okay? It's amazing. If I had an avatar of myself up here, it would look smarter than me. It would talk without making mistakes. The hand gestures would be the same because it replicates, but it's astounding how much smoother it makes a lot of the things you do. Okay, so you could even say, please say this with less emotion, and it'll give you back something which is doing, you could use for your submission. Anybody partnering with hardware companies with an AI software product? Okay, so we've got that a bit. All right, so there's a whole mixture of stuff. The percentage of people that are putting their hands up is higher than last year, and last year was the first year we asked that question. So it tells you that at least a portion of artificial intelligence is involved in almost all of the companies that are here. Okay, we're going to go into a couple things. These are the topics we're going to talk about right now, and I'm going to stop just sort of meandering around all over the place, and Lesley will come up in a moment or two. I'll say a couple of introductory pieces, but our idea is market research, and one of the key things, segmentation, understanding consumers. Okay. We'll go through things which are more marketing oriented, but they're product marketing oriented. In other words, what's the whole solution? Do you have to build absolutely everything? The answer is no. Like, would you rebuild Microsoft Office? I don't think so. Okay, what goes into product positioning? And it's not, product positioning isn't necessarily what it is what people think it does and what its value is. And finally, we'll talk a bit about metrics. And our goal here is for the questions that are part of the New Ventures BC competition, we're really going to try to help you answer questions 1, 2, and 3. That's sort of the focus of what we're going to do right now. So if we look at this, a successful growth company as a minimum viable product, but it evolves. And it turns around and says, yes, there is demand for my product. They get the match correct, so they have product market fit, and that helps them to develop a revenue model. So an addressable market with an engine of growth in a clearly defined market niche makes it a lot easier to do this. Who's heard of Hootsuite? Okay, so what was Hootsuite's first market? What did it do at the very beginning? Yes, but it was, which is correct. Very, very first market it had was it helped you to post on Twitter. And it did a really good job of that. And their timing was impeccable because it came out when Twitter had 5 million users. And all of a sudden Twitter and every other form of social media grew exponentially, so they just rode along with the growth in social media. So in this case, they had a product, there was a market that helped them to generate revenue, but more than anything, they had an engine of growth. How many of you would like to be in the newspaper business right now? Sorta? Digital. No, I didn't say digital. Okay, so the paper and newspaper business is a difficult market to be in. It's totally different than a lot of the digital industries and digital businesses opportunities that are there. So you can see that what's attractive and what has growth is a big factor, something that is really important. So just to talk quickly about market research, one of the key things that I believe is important, and one of the things I would suggest to everybody is to talk about segmentation. So if you say, I have a product that everybody can use, I'll tell you now the jury is not going to be super excited. You say, I have a product that all sorts of people could use, but I'm going to start selling it right here because this group will get the most value and benefit. That is actually far more important because it tells you how you're going to spend what little marketing money you have. How many of you would like to go and compete with Apple? You need a fortune to do that. So you have to start somewhere, and then you can land and expand. So if you segment, it narrows the whole product definition. What are all the things I have to supply? Limits real competition. If I'm successful with one product or in one area, it allows me to expand. And if I become a market leader or even a market player, it allows me to use that to go and do different things or to expand in that marketplace. Oops. Can we go back one? Okay. So probably the best way to think about it is a great quote from a gentleman called Sam Walton, who is the founder of Walmart. Now, whether or not I'm a frequent flyer at Walmart doesn't matter, but his comment was, whenever you get confused, go to the store. The consumer has all the answers and all the money. So what's interesting is you get things like, years ago, Apple finally bought out a larger phone. And one of the reasons they did that was it competed with the Samsung product. Then they went and asked all the people who had the Samsung product, are you going to switch to Apple? And it was like over 50%, oh yeah, I'm switching. And then they had a discussion with their friends at TELUS or Rogers or Bell about what that would cost them. And the number that actually switched and the number that paid to switch was far lower than 50%. So people vote with their wallets. And that's a key thing that's really important. And I'm going to turn it over to Lesley. Okay. Thank you.
A little more, so I'm going to go with this mic. Okay, so testing your value proposition. So as David said, we need to know things from our customers, or our potential customers, or other people who are in the market. And so in looking at your value proposition, hang on, I'm going to switch this to the other side. We need to learn, who is your customer? You might have an idea, but you might not be right. You need to know what their problem is. You've got an idea for a product, but is it actually solving a problem for the people you think it is? What do these people actually need to solve the problem that they have? Could your product do that? If so, do they want your product over something they're already using, some other solution, not using anything at all? Will they pay you enough for it? So they might pay you something, but it might cost you more to make it than they're willing to pay or have a budget to pay. And then if they purchase it, can they actually purchase it? Maybe it's a global export issue and people in Finland are the only ones who can buy your product because that's the way it goes. That's not a big enough market. So can they purchase it and can they implement it? They may have a system where it actually can't integrate. And so at each step, there's a lot of things that we need to know, and the best way to do that is to do some research. And what I'm going to say is sort of my biggest piece of advice is be very, very diligent and very humble in your research. So we all think that our product is fantastic, our idea is fantastic, and we should. It's the only way we're going to be able to put in the effort to take something and build it. It's a lot of work. It's very hard. You have to love it. But you have to be able to be humble enough to rigorously test it and say there might be things that aren't right. I might be getting something wrong. I could be doing something better. And so research is your opportunity to do this. It's your opportunity to really go out and say, if I really love this as much as I think I do, I want it to be the best it can possibly be. And I want that product market fit to be there. So rigorously test everything as hard as you can. Look for weaknesses. So it's a sort of user experience testing thing. Build it like you're right, and then test it like you're wrong. Where can you find the holes? And it's better if you find them first. So the way to think about this is it's basically a crash test, right? If you're putting your product into the driver's seat, you want to, before it gets out on the road, before it's encountering a semi coming at it, before you're spending all of the money you're looking for investors, do everything you can to find out what's wrong. Run it up against walls, smash it. Because if your crash test dummy survives, that value proposition that you've put it in, that car that it's driving, is strong. You know that you're going for a market that exists. You know that you're solving a problem that exists. You know that these people can give you enough money to actually have a viable business model. And you've got a segment that will buy. You found that group that you are fulfilling a need. Otherwise, it's weak. So now you're just basically driving around a cardboard car, going into a big market up against Apple in a big semi coming at you, and you're not going to survive. So doing that work up front, where it's safe before you're really on the line, is important. So I'm going to walk you through, because it's a little tricky to say. It's great for me to just stand up here and say, do the research. But at different stages, you're going to need to know different things. So the example that I'm going to use is Tile. And so Tile is basically the precursor to like the AirPod or the AirTag. And what they did was try and figure out at every stage what the questions were and how to find the answers. And they didn't do this the easy way. So the first question that goes for every product, so the way these slides are set up is the questions, hypotheses should work for anything. The example I'm giving you is Tile. So first question is this a problem for a segment of people? So Tile is the little thing that if I lose something, I know where it is because it's attached to this thing that will give me a signal. I can go and find it. And when they first started, this wasn't quite as easy in terms of technology and implementation. So you had to have a specific type of phone with a specific type of capability that not everyone had, all of these things. But at the start it was, is it a problem? Is it a problem that I lose my keys all the time and I can't find them and I don't know where they are? Or my wallet, or whatever this important thing is, my briefcase. And if so, the hypothesis was this is a problem that can be solved with me attaching this little ID tag to it. And the prediction was there's enough people out there that have this problem that are going to want this solution. And the way you can test that was doing customer discovery interviews. So they went and talked to people, real people, everyday people. Do you lose your keys? Would you like it if you could find them faster in your house? Do you have a phone that would actually work with this technology that we need to do? And then their analysis was, okay, let's look at all of these answers, put them together, see what we find. And what they found was, yes, people frequently lose their keys. Yes, they would like to quickly be able to find their keys because it's usually in the morning when they're in a rush and their kids are crying. And if you could just get rid of this problem for me, I would probably give you money for it. So at that stage, that's enough. So then they need to figure out what's your minimum viable product, right? So now we're not building this entire nice sophisticated tile. We're saying, what's the one thing that I need to actually take out to people so they can test, in a sense, right? What's this thing that's going to get me out the door? So we know that it's a problem that they lose things. Their question was, can I build a tile that can connect to my phone, and is this a good solution? Does this solve this problem that you have? And so the hypothesis is, yes, we think this is great. We think that we can do this. And the prediction was that I should be able, we need something sort of concrete to nail it down, not just, oh yeah, it was better, right? 6 out of 7 people say something was better. Well, what does better mean? So it was, let's look at, does it make it faster for them to find their keys? Is there actually an efficiency that we can build in? Is there something concrete that we can say, did this save you X amount of time, along those lines? And the way that you can do that is basically testing. Give some people an early version of this thing and say, here, go use it. And track it, journal it, whatever it is. How frequently did you use it? If people had it and they only used it once, That also tells you maybe that group isn't your segment, as opposed to the people in the same amount of time use it 17 times. What makes those two groups of people different? That's an interesting question, because the 17-time people are probably going to use it and be more likely to buy it than the one-time. But the one-time person still has good feedback on, did it work? Could you attach it? Was it really hard to connect it to your phone? So that's sort of then you're looking at who's your, narrowing in on who your segment is, and narrowing in on how your product actually functions, and is it actually solving that problem? Does that product, that solution, because you need to be in love with the problem, right, of how do I get people to find their things faster, not that the tile is the way to do it, right? If they had designed a big pool noodle sized thing that people were like, oh, well, I can't carry that around with me, that's useless, I don't use it. If the thing was, oh, but if I change it so that it's small and it connects to things, that's useful. So figuring out what's that problem that your product is trying to solve, not my product is exactly the way to solve this problem. So then, this is what I love about what Tile did. Will people pay for this, right? It's all well and good for people to say, oh yeah, I totally loved using this when you gave it to me for free. It was my favorite thing, it was great. Question is, will real people in the real world pay for it? And so what you're looking at there is, this product solves this problem better than anything else that's out there, or better than me not using it, to the extent that I'm willing to give you money for this. And so what they did, and a certain amount of money. So what they did was, instead of going to like Kickstarter or crowdfunder, like where people who are looking for new innovative things show up, what they did was basically set up their own marketing website and said, okay, let's try and advertise. Can we get the word out to people in the real world about this? And it was just a like, no, we're not promising that we're giving you this, but would you buy it if we had it for you? And they oversubscribed to what they thought. Right? They were going for, you know, $1 million worth of potential sales, and they got 2.4 million or something. Like, it was over and above what they were expecting, which validated that there is a market out there of people who are willing to give you money for this. Right? And it wasn't an easy, it wasn't, I'm going to go to my friends and family and see if I can get 17 people to give me money for this when they have to because they like me. This was a real world, we're not associated with you at all test. And so then what they can look at from there is, you know, let's look at price points. Who are these people coming in? What packages that we put together did they potentially like? How many do they want? Who buys them? Who are these people? Right? Is this the same as the segment that used it 17 times in the trial as opposed to 1? Is it young parents who are doing this? Is it sports enthusiasts who are always losing their keys by creeks or wherever else when they're out doing adventures and need to be able to find them so they can drive their car home? Those are very different segments who might have different problems, specific problems, but the end goal that your product is solving is, I don't have something that I need to have close to me. You're going to sell to them differently, though. You're going to market to those differently. Right? People who are outdoors and adventuring are looking at the MEC website as opposed to people with young families who might also be adventurers, but they're more likely to be looking at like the Toys R Us or Babies R Us website. So you've got different segments that you're paying attention to, but you can learn this. And then you're looking at scale. So beyond a single one-off release, is this a one-shot thing that I'm buying? Is there a market that will continue to buy this? Is there a way that you can monetize this beyond? Is this a buy it once and you're done? Is this a, oh, I've used it once, it was so great, now I'm going to buy a bunch more so I can attach them to other things that I lose less frequently but are maybe more expensive? Or am I going to use it in my business because I have, you know, things that I leave on site in construction sites and I need to know where they are, and so this way I can monitor them. So basically then you start looking at, can you build enough of them? Can you produce enough of them? Let's look at manufacturing. What are sort of the volumes that I need? What's the shipping? What's the distribution? So you're looking at different questions as you're going across this maturity level of your product and your market and your understanding of that market and how they're buying. So this sort of goes across the way of, but the suggestion I'm giving you here is anytime you're going in to do customer discovery, market research, you want to be saying, what's the question? What's my assumption? Because you always have an assumption on these things. So be very clear and very specific about defining that assumption. Put it in a hypothesis. What's your prediction? What do I think is going to happen? How are you going to go and test that? Are you doing interviews? Is this a sales thing? Are you looking at pricing and purchasing information? And does that fit with what you're trying to do? And then how are you looking at this? What's your baseline of success? Right? If you're like, oh, well, I want 7 people out of 14 to buy it, to say that they'd buy it. Is that enough? And then if you only get 6, are you like, well, that's close enough to 7 that I should keep going down this path? Right, so this is where this being humble and being rigorous about your research comes in, of give yourself some goalposts. And if you're not past the goalpost that you thought was reasonable and fair, why not? And are there hard questions that you need to ask, which might be, I need to fine-tune my product. I need to spend a little more time looking for who my segment is. But this is, before you do things, is always the time to ask those questions. So how do you do this? Going back to the business model canvas, at this point, you're going to want to fill in each of those blocks on that canvas. And you're going to want to look at and be very aware of where you're putting in things that you know for sure that are fact that you have evidence for, and where you're making assumptions. So anywhere where you're saying, I think, or I assume, or I hope, or we don't know, those are good places to start thinking about, do I need to do work on this area? And they're all linked to each other, right? So start also looking at what's sort of your flow-through chart of, if you're wrong on this assumption, what impact does that have on the next one and the next one? So if I'm wrong on who my target audience is, then I'm probably going to be wrong on what my channel is. And those kinds of things can start having really big exponential effects if you haven't done that work early. Be like, oh, wait, I just spend a little more time fine-tuning this one, and then this flows better. So again, another reason to spend some time and keep updating your business. And then once you've done that, put together, at this point, a customer discovery plan. So where do you need to do that work? What's the order you need to do it in? Who do you need to talk to? And what do you need to do to go and answer these questions? Change some of these assumptions into things that you actually know. And importantly, pay attention, like I said, to who you need to talk to, who you need to hear from. So sampling bias is a big thing in research. And it's a big thing in like AI and language models. Whatever we put in is what we get out. And so if I'm not talking to the right people, the information and the answers they give me aren't the right things that I need to be working with. So it can be hard to find the people in the industry you need, or those kinds of things. Spend the time, spend the resources, talk to people that you know to get you connections to the right people. Don't just talk to the people that you know. So be very mindful of where your sources of information are coming from, and are they sort of the right ones for what you're trying to do, what hypothesis you're trying to test. Prioritize de-risking. So again, sort of that, what impact, what as you go. What is the most expensive, most important, least informative thing that you have right now? If you have limited time, if you have limited resources, focus on one. So scattershot, oh, I'll go talk to 3 people about some things and then look at manufacturing. Spend the time to talk to the one person. If you can get an industry analyst who can give you the take home from what talking to 7 other people would do that. But make sure you're looking at the important questions, not just the easy ones. Because usually the harder ones are the most important and the ones that will impact what your strategy, what your decision, what your direction is. And look at what and why. So this is sort of where the fun part, I think, of research is there's curiosity. Right? So if I have the one person, going back to our tile example, who used it 1 time and one person who used it 17 times, I could stop there. What's more interesting and more informative in the big picture is if I then say, well, why did you only use it once and why did you use it 17 times? What did you have it on? If you had it on your keys and you had it on, your dog, and your dog runs away a lot, and your keys don't move that much and you're actually pretty standard about where you put them, that's important to know, because maybe I didn't think pet owners were a segment. Maybe I should go and talk to some other pet owners just to find out, the Husky Club is a great one because they climb fences and disappear all the time. The Bulldog Club is less of a, market for me. So asking the questions around the answers. You don't need to follow up on everything. I'm not saying that then you should ditch your parent market to go to the pet market or try and do them both at the same time. But then you have the information to make that decision. So anytime you're asking a what, see if you can ask a why. And then also you can use that later for marketing. Right? So say you figure out your segment and you've talked to these people and they've told you what this problem is and why they're using it and why you're helping them. You can then use that to market to other people people in that segment and say, hey, I know you have this problem. I know I have the solution. I know why you're going to like it. In words that they've already told you. So you're sort of saving yourself work down the line by talking to them earlier and paying attention. So that's the how to do the research and customer discovery. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave.
Great. So when you think about it, there's a combination of revolutionary products and evolutionary products. So AI is a revolutionary product right now. It is changing things. What are the other ones we've had recently that have been revolutionary products over the last 30, 40 years? What do you think? Yeah. Blockchain, yes. It's taken a long time for it to actually become implemented, but it has ability to do that. Mobility, yeah. The dot-com boom, yeah, I lived during the dot-com boom. That was no fun. But the idea of the internet and then the fact that you could have dot-com very clearly is something which is revolutionary. Then IoT and every device is connected is somewhat revolutionary. You go way back in time, things like the electric light bulb and artificial light, real game changers, things that make a difference there. So the majority of you will end up with evolutionary products, and the segment is predefined, okay? The challenge is to refine or get a definition of how you fit into the marketplace. One of the things that happens when you have an evolutionary product is that mainstream market customers usually insist that your solution fits their problem, and they have certain buying behavior and they want that to really be accommodated at the same time. So there's a guy called Steve Blank who's a well-known professor at Stanford. He's also been incredibly successful. Qualcomm, he set up GM's factories in China, all sorts of different stuff. One of the things that he does is he says the idea for you is to take your hypothesis about what's important and turn it into reality. And you have to go out and figure out how to do that. So the statement you get is that large companies execute in a market, startups search for a business model, and then you want to build, measure, and learn. One of the best angel investors in British Columbia, the bottom two bullet points are a direct quote. So if you are a startup that's going to make a prediction, this is what I think is going to happen in the marketplace, I'll roll my product out and I'll see if it works. Measure the results, repeat, and then see what happens, and then do it again. He's quite interested. If you just sort of throw it out there and say, I'll see what happens, quite often if you're having a meeting with him, he'll try to cut the meeting short because he doesn't think you'll succeed. So a lot of it is prove that your product fits the market and what's the reality. So there's a link under next in the slide deck, so you can watch it on your own time because we don't have a lot of time this morning. And it's Steve Jobs explaining Next Computing in 1990. It's an internal video for the company he ran after he left Apple and before he went back to Apple. Who knows the history of Next? Yeah. Tell me.
Well, Steve Jobs was laid out of his own company and he created this new company trying to show that he was building a new iOS for this. And I think he had nothing in real. He had just the concept and everyone was excited about it, and that's why they got an offer to buy him back.
Right.
And also he started Pixar during that time as well.
Yeah. Other things? Who else has a, yeah?
The Next Computer didn't have a floppy disk.
Correct. Next Computer was different. So he was the first person. Next Computer, when you think about it, was actually a connected workstation. It had all sorts of different things. It leveraged new things, and he did actually have working prototypes, and he worked at it. But if you watch that video, he goes through, these are who the early adopters will be. This is what the value proposition will be for them. This is how we're going to market to a very, very limited series of different companies. This is who our competition is. This is how we think we can beat our competition, and this is why we will succeed. And he goes through all the same steps that most entrepreneurs do. Later on, Apple goes, well, we don't do market research. We just define new products. Well, yeah, Apple has an advantage, but when he was at Next, he did not have that advantage. And he did all the normal things that people do. And it worked out well. So here's another one, a top-down versus bottom-up. Remember that revenue is not a function of market size. So if you can say, I just need to capture 1% of the market and I'll be a gazillionaire, everybody goes, which 1%? All right, so if you have a $1 billion market, 2% penetration is 20 million, but the reality is who they are is very important, because you can't say, oh, well, I have one customer in every single major city all over the globe. It means you can't manage them. All right, so revenue is a function of leads you attract, conversion rates, and the price. So there's a little bit of an equation at the bottom. There's another video in the top, which we're not going to play again today. And everybody know who Ali G is, the comedian, right? So it's him pitching the ice cream glove to Donald Trump. And he teaches you how to do it incorrectly. It's really quite amazing, because it's just very interesting viewing, but don't do what Ali G does. So we use the idea of top-down versus, and it's important. So what is my total addressable market? And then I go down, what's my theoretical market? What's the potential market? The available one, addressable market. And then addressable market is what can I do today? So if you're a small company in Vancouver, you're probably not going to sell lots of stuff in Florida or in South Africa. It's going to be really difficult to do. What you will get is also, what is the target market and what is market demand? So that's top down, and you really need to do both top down and bottom up. So what's the available budget in the target market that I have right now? What's it going to be like? So if I'm trying to sell stuff to electric car manufacturers in North America, new things that they can use, do you think they're going to be very receptive right now? No, these guys are totally under siege for all sorts of different reasons, and that as a marketplace is probably not going to work very well. But what's my market reach? Who can I get hold of? How many will attach to me in some way? In other words, they become part of maybe the top of my sales funnel or something like that. What's my real addressable market? Which ones do I target? Because I know that the fit is best. All sorts of people will come and have a look, but there's a target market which fits your product better than anybody else. And then finally, what's my win rate? Okay, so we go through and we look, as I said, I'm drawing this as a bowling alley. And the concept, and this comes from Jeffrey Moore, is the idea of a bowling alley, and the head pin is the one that fits your product the best. So why is it going to work better than all the others? So his theory was identify a segment you can dominate, which could translate into identify a segment where you might actually be able to get in. And then win a market share leadership or become a player in the marketplace. Then you turn it around and go leverage leadership to win over adjacent segments. In other words, am I able to sell to people in British Columbia? Can I migrate into Alberta or something else like that? What's interesting is the British Columbia government is very, very interested in export sales. And unfortunately, the numbers aren't superb all the time. So now they count it as an export sale if you sell in Alberta. And I'm like, what? Okay, so the definition of how things work varies a little bit all the time. But the idea of where do I start in the marketplace is actually a key thing, and it's really important. Another way of thinking at it is, here's the market, there's you. All right, you could be on the outside of the market in 4 or 5 different places. If I have a software product, there are whole groups of different people who could use it all over the place. Anybody here ever done a Kickstarter campaign? Anybody who knows what Kickstarter is? Okay. What's interesting is Kickstarter, especially the neat little products and stuff, the majority of the people who buy them are programmers who've been in Silicon Valley for 20, 30 years. They have lots of money. And they just buy the stuff because they like it. They don't ever use it. All right, so Kickstarter is really interesting, but it's not a reflection of the market because it's a very specific group of people. One of the things they say is that the number of individuals who identify themselves as early adopters and techno enthusiasts is growing in North America all the time. It's almost 1 million people. So if you put on your website, I do X for Y, There's always people who'll come to your website and go, I'm interested. Wow, this is cool. This is really interesting. I'd like to do that. They may not be reflective of the real market. They may just be the enthusiasts who will go and say, I'm really interested in this stuff. Okay? Same people who buy quantum computing. Okay, good to know. Yeah. So, quiz. I said I run a sailing school. A number of years ago, we decided that you could also buy really nice sailing clothing at our sailing school. Because if people come down, they have to be interested, right? Good. Okay, so we ended up becoming a Helly Hansen dealer. We could sell Helly Hansen stuff. Who knows what that is? Okay, very nice, fancy, effective, but flashy sailing clothing. We sold jackets. We sold on our website, also in the store. In the first year, how many of you think we sold, we'll just start at the bottom, 101 to 500 jackets? How many people think that? Okay, I like you. Okay, good. 26 to 100. How many people think that's the number? All right, okay, I can get along with that. 11 to 25. All right, okay. Somewhere between 0 and 10, low numbers. You people are doubters, but you're correct. Okay, we sold 2. And one of them was to a lady in Denmark who lived beside the factory. Turns out that sales tax in Canada was low enough that it was cheaper to buy here. So, how many of you shop for sunglasses at a rental car store? So, it's the same thing. People buy things in certain places. How many of you, McDonald's used to have a product called McRibs, right? Okay, how many of you bought that? They also sold pizza for a while. Okay, so the reality is that quite often people have set buying patterns. They don't buy X unless it's where they think they're going to get X. And that's actually a relatively important way of looking at things. So where you want to end up is, I have an internal focus when I'm building my product and I'm building my business. I want to turn around and say, okay, there's product and features. This is what I put into something. But what I really want to understand is what's the customer value in my target market. If I have lots of features, I want to understand the differentiation. What's the one thing which makes me really different in the marketplace that's highly valued by the initial target market? And that is quite an important thing to figure out. I can be reactive. Everybody I talk to, that's different than knowing what the head pin segment is. How many of you are actually going to go to Web Summit? Well, I think we asked this at the end. Okay. So if you're talking about your product with somebody, don't fall in the trap of accepting everybody's opinion as important. Lesley told you earlier on, if you have industry analysts who really know what they're doing, their opinions are more valuable than mine. Okay. So make sure that you go and talk to people who can be very helpful and be methodical about it as well. So you go from unpredictable results to hopefully reliable customer base. Just going to go through a couple things that are, this is an older graph. Almost everything begins with search. So you could have the world's most amazing product. There are some people who are in robotics and hardware. Who's that? Hardware folks and stuff. Okay, you need a website, okay? Okay, you got to have the ability for people to find you. How many of you updated your website in the last 6 months? That's good. How many of you didn't have a website until 6 months ago? Okay, another question. So one of the biggest things you need to do is continually update your website, because most people will go, I'm looking for something, they hear about you, then they'll go to your website, and if it is out of date and is not consistent with the message they originally heard, they will not stay. Okay, so that's a really important thing to remember. How does search fit into this? So we're looking at different roles of search and stuff, and what's important at the beginning, and then what's important at the end. It changes all the time. All right, so if you have a new product and somebody from a large to medium-sized company reaches out to you, wants information, who's probably the first person who connects with you? Who do you think? What's their job description? Sorry? Sales, it actually could be a technical buyer. is one of the things that quite often, let's say you have a really interesting new product for managing a network. The person who's going to reach out to you could be somebody who runs networks, who's a very technical, and he wants to qualify your product. Is it going to solve my needs? Is it going to work? Is it going to fit in? We're AWS, this works on Azure, forget it. Okay, so is it going to meet the technical needs that we have? And that's the first person that you talk to a lot of the time. This is not reflective of the marketplace. You see at the end, what becomes more important? Brand. Okay, so how many of you ever got fired for buying Microsoft Office? No, it's a very safe choice. Okay, so all of a sudden you get into what's your risk aversion, you get into this is great, but I found 5 companies that will actually solve my problem, and 3 of them are already vendors for us. I'm picking one of them. So it varies a little bit as things move along. So how many people are involved in a buying decision? Okay, you look at the numbers and go, if it's a small company, 100 to 500, 6.8. There's a lot of people get involved in stuff like this. So I run a sailing school. There are 3 of us as partners. We still discuss everything as a group. Not sort of what's for lunch, but sort of more important stuff than that. How about you guys? How big are your meetings for making major decisions?
Probably between, 5 to 10, depending on what it's for. And then, again, it's technical.
Yeah, then it goes farmed out to the people who understand that stuff.
Yeah, and then comes back up.
Okay, so that's a normal thing. So it goes like that. If this is government, is this a higher number or a lower number? Higher number, okay. And why? Okay, so when there's a committee, it reduces risk for the company because everybody's opinion is listened to. It also reduces risk for the individuals who are making the decision, personal risk. So if you're in government, last thing you want to do is make a mistake, and sort of opt for a really neat payroll system that for some reason doesn't work. Okay, so that's one of the bottom lines for a lot of decision making in government. Yeah. Hey, do we know who made that decision? Okay. We don't want to know who they are. Okay. That's the amazing part. Okay, so participants in the buying process, the users, influencers, buyers, deciders, or gatekeepers. The person you will quite often meet, if there's ever a consultant involved, they're an influencer. They've been bought in to do an assessment and help you decide whether or not this is going to work. They help the company. They're also, to a certain extent, quite often the gatekeeper. How often do you meet the decider at the very beginning? What do you think? Yes? No? Very seldom. Okay, so, and let's say they're building or buying a new POS system for the cashiers at Safeway. Do they go out and ask all the cashiers what they think? No. Okay, the users are quite often represented by managers who make decisions on behalf of the end user. So it's not, so if you go, I talked to 12 cashiers at Safeway and they just don't like these purple buttons, they want them a different color, nobody's going to care. All right, it's a function of other things which are different in the way they're put together. One thing that's really important is third-party validation. If you have existing customers, you have case studies, you have all those sorts of things, it makes a significant difference. So if you have the odd negative comment, that can be all right, especially if you mitigate to change that. In other words, you upgrade or you overcome the issues that the buyer had and some of the other pieces that are like that. So, hotel room shopping. When you book a hotel room, do you read all the comments from past customers? How many people go and look at comments from past customers? It turns out that it's very, very normal. Okay? People go down and look at them. If there's 100 comments and all of them are positive, what do you think? It means that they deleted some of them. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, so, but if there's a negative comment and they reach out and say, sorry about this, this is how we're going to do that stuff, that has very, very high currency. That's actually correct. Okay, so we look for third-party validation, and the easiest place to find it is on Expedia or Google or wherever else it is when there's all the customer feedback. If you book a hotel room, do you insist that it has everything you want, even if it costs more? Who's in the everything? It's got to have everything I want category. Okay. Most of the important things and value. Okay, this is a trick question to a certain extent, but that's really usually the answer you come up with. So one of the things there is that people look for certain things, and they don't necessarily look for an enormous list of features. So we come back to, we haven't talked a lot about what's called value proposition in great detail, but one of the things that's important is that we will talk about what's the most compelling value proposition you have and why that equals your differentiation in a specific market segment. And that's an important thing to do. So do you need to build every feature potential customers ask for? The answer is no. All right, why or why not? Because they may be in different segments. If somebody comes to you from a totally different segment, they may ask you for stuff that is not a part of your product roadmap, and they may not be reflective of enough customers to make it worth your while to build all those features and all the other different things. So the differentiation has to be based on a number of different items. One thing we do say some of the time, though, is that if you have a customer come to you and says, "I really like this," and you go, "That's a lot of custom work for us. I'll do it for you," and you ask for an enormously high price. And you get to the stage where you keep asking for a high price until they make it worth your while to do it. Okay, but when in doubt, don't get distracted for small amounts of money. It's just not worth it. All right, so we've got a video from our friend Sheldon, and we'll play this one really quickly. I think the gentleman at the back is going to do that. And so you need to align your messages to the way real people think.
First there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
However, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Then get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
It's true. But the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
Well, you wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat.
No, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Whoa, wait a second. Who's they?
The Xbox.
You're kidding!
No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
See, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
Okay. Great. So the real message here is he's not a normal buyer. Okay, he's very, very technology driven. So what he's interested in doing is is quite different. And one of the things that we look at, I think we'll come back to the PowerPoint in a second, is if you build a competitive matrix. If you look at this one, you go all the way down until it's about item number 7 or 8 where you get key product features. A lot of the time it's like, who do I sell to? Oh, it's used by these guys, so then it could be good for me. What's the financial health of the company? There's a really neat company in Vancouver years ago that got a major customer, was in the POS system space, like it was a point of sale solution, and it was built, and it was a cloud-based solution. They went to the customer, and the customer's great. We just want to make sure that your company is going to still be here for a while. So we'd like you to go raise more money and put it in the bank. And everybody's like, what? And they said, yeah, how much? You go, $10 million. And they did. They raised the money, and all of a sudden their balance sheet was super healthy. And they were like, okay. And they ended up getting the account, which was worth a lot of money to them, and it changed the way they ran the company. But that's how large companies will often view an early stage startup. Are they going to be here a year from now? Or do I have to start over? Again, it's risk reward. So I'd like to just talk really quickly about whole product. And the definition is what's the physical product and all the associated factors, all the other things that are here, they're there, they're all over the place. We'll go and look at some of the other different pieces. And this comes from a book by Jeffrey Moore. He's really good. It's called Crossing the Chasm. It's a really neat book to read if you haven't read it. Like his book and also Steve Blank's, if you have insomnia, this can cure it. But at the same time, it's a good reading. It's actually quite effective. So what are the complementary products and all the other things that you need to work on? So years ago, I was with a company in an industrial sector, and we'd sold an experimental system, it's hardware and everything else, to Rolls-Royce. And it took years later, they weren't converting it into production. And we're like, what's going on? So finally, we sent one of our technicians over, and just before he left, they said, you're going to go over there, ask him what's going on and stuff. And I said, okay, you have an unlimited alcohol budget. I want you to figure out why they haven't put it into production. And he's in Scotland, and he phones me one day from a bar, Collect, and goes, and he's obviously been there all day, and he goes, we need to have a service technician within 12 kilometers of the factory. It's like, what? They didn't tell us that. No, it's an unwritten rule. We hired somebody, and they bought more equipment for production right away. So every once in a while, there's a whole product requirement. It's a little obscure, and it's hard to figure out, difficult to understand. So different types of hotels. So my son played hockey. Soccer's similar for a lot of the other guys. They go to tournaments. They go to tournaments down in Seattle or wherever else they do. He actually now coaches hockey and all the other stuff. Always would stay at the hotel for vacation travelers. What's the number one value proposition for a hockey team? You look at the things on that wheel. What do you think is number one? What do people think? Sorry? Breakfast. Somebody says breakfast. What else? Shuttle van? That's what parents are for. Okay. What else? Does it have, one thing that's not on there is a lot of them have a swimming pool, right? But they're playing in a hockey tournament. They're not going to go in the pool. They're tired. Okay. The breakfast is by far the number one thing. Buffet breakfast. The stage where I was at a tournament once, team captain says, we have a game today at 7:30 in the morning. Can we have breakfast, go play in the game, and then come back and have breakfast again? And that's the biggest thing. This is a 14-year-old, right? Okay. What's the criteria and what's really important? So quite often, and this is really important, there's one really, really important thing of why people want to go to in this case, it's a hotel. There's one thing that matches their perception of value proposition. It may not be what they get all the value out of. Once they own your product and they're using it, there may be other things that create enormous amounts of value. There's usually one overriding factor in the buying decision. Okay, another example. Who's the equivalent of Dunkin' Donuts in Canada? It's Tim Hortons. Okay, so years ago, Dunkin' Donuts in the US said, we got to figure out how to compete with this Starbucks outfit. These guys are doing pretty well, and all the other stuff. So their way of doing that was to say, we'll take 100 people to go to Starbucks and we'll give them a Dunkin' Donuts card, and they go to Dunkin' Donuts for a month. And we'll do it the other way around as well. So if you're a Starbucks guy, you get to go to Dunkin' Donuts for a month, and then we'll see what happens and stuff. So what they did was they made this switch. So what percentage of people switch to the other coffee shop after a month? Greater than 50%. What do you think? Okay, 25 to 50? 10 to 25. 5 to 10? Yeah, they'll switch a bit. 0 to 5. Okay, the answer is 0. And it's interesting because it turns out that they're totally different tribes, is the way they thought of it. And they're totally different tribes because they have different value propositions and all the other stuff. In theory, the people at Starbucks are considered more individualistic, and people who go to Dunkin' Donuts are a little bit more whatever the situation. The comments were the best part. The people who were from Starbucks, you go there and they got Formica tables, and everybody's wearing baseball caps. And then all the donuts have sugar on them. And then the other way of looking at it was all the people who were from Dunkin' Donuts, they'd go there and go, well, they have all these really dried out cookies that come from Italy. And you can't even buy a small, medium, or large. Okay, they have all these fancy names. The best line ever was, one of the guys goes, it's like spending Christmas with people you don't know. So the real answer was 0, because they're from totally different buying groups. And I'm in trouble, aren't I, Angie? I'm a little behind schedule. Okay, we'll sort of pick it up a little bit. So when we talk about positioning, is why will they buy from us versus our competition? It's the positioning idea. It's a combination of managing the product and its presentation to fit a predetermined place in the mind of the customer. In other words, what do they think of my product? It may not actually have the best features. Like iPhone has some amazing pieces of hardware in it, but it's not the best in every category. But we think it is, or at least some people think it is. So it's market segmentation plus competitive differentiation. Other things that are part of it are, you can look at it and say perceived status within the market. The leader in a market always gets to charge a premium. It's one of the things that happen. It's really important to remember that part. Building relationships to secure and communicate competitive advantage. Every once in a while, there's reputational stuff which makes a really big difference. So my wife drives a very safe car. What type of car does she drive? Okay. How many people think it's a Volvo? Okay. So did I. Yeah. So the real answer is that Volvo has an amazing safety reputation. It hasn't won a safety award in over 10 years. I think Volvo stands for very expensive used parts. Okay, so my wife is Swedish, but she does not drive a Volvo. She drives a Prius. But the image everybody has of a Volvo is that it's a very safe car, especially the station wagon, or we call it the Swedish hearse. But it is known as a very safe vehicle. All of the others have something which they're known for, all of the different car companies on the list. So when I look at positioning the impact, it makes it a lot easier to do other things. And one of the key things that's at the top of this circle is partnerships. So if I have a really good image, others will partner with me because there is benefit to being associated with my company. And it makes it a lot easier. I can round up my whole product. I don't have to build everything myself. Okay, it does all sorts of different things, and that translates into everything from a lot of different stuff, including pricing, and Stephen is here, so we'll hear more and more about the real aspects of pricing. So there's a really neat little exercise you can go through, product positioning, how you describe your product to potential customers. And when you do this, it's not about features, it's all about what they want to hear. All right, so what's the scenario and stuff? What do we do? How do we sell? How do we meet our customers' needs? So I said it to everybody earlier on that I run a sailing school. And everybody asked me, what do you do at the sailing school? And the answer is, well, we try to make kids comfortable and confident so they can go on the water with their friends in a very safe environment. And then once we've done that, we can teach them how to sail really, really rapidly. Who wants to hear those first 4 things? They're emotional hooks, but who wants to hear that? Yeah, actually that's too broad, it's the mother. Okay, the decision maker is the mom. All right, so, there's a nice deck at Jericho. Everybody can sit and have coffee and watch their kids do whatever they want to do and all the other stuff. If you go up there and talk to the parents, that's what they tell you. So I'm a parrot. I say the same thing back, and we've actually changed a lot of things we do in order to create that all the time. Makes a difference. So you can create a positioning statement. So you're really answering 6 different questions. So here's your criteria. How does it all fit together? And you can turn it into 6 different statements. You're not allowed to build a list here and go and. It's not allowed. All right? And then one thing you can do is, I see this repeatedly. How many of you are going to pitch at Web Summit or something like that? You're going to go in the little pitch competition. Tell everybody what your product is first. Because I've seen people in pitch competitions where the people giving feedback go, are you making hardware or software? If you get that, that's a bad sign. So don't just launch into what the market is. Say, we're a software company that does X for this market. And then everybody will get the context right away, and it'll make things a lot better. A couple of neat examples. They're going to be in the deck. This is the iPod. When it first came out, remember, it came out, we didn't have the iPhone. We didn't have any of those sorts of things. And what's the number one value proposition piece for the majority of people who bought it? Remember when it came out, it cost $600. And it was usually sold to the same people who bought Blackberries. In other words, a senior business executive who was traveling. What do people think? What was the number one value proposition? Sorry? Yeah, it was songs in your pocket. But really what it turned out was iTunes. So everybody was happy to pay for the music again because you needed a PhD in programming to get the music onto any other device. It just was way easier because everything worked seamlessly and it auto-updated. It was always synced. All the different things that we take for granted today were really important then and really created a lot of value. So we go back to Starbucks, and this is what they wrote back in 1985. And then Starbucks has gone through a restructuring a little bit later and a few other things. And then the thing that's really neat is, unlike their differentiator, is drip coffee in a plastic cup. They're differentiating themselves from the old way of doing it. They're not saying, oh, we're better than Blends or whoever it is. They're just differentiating themselves. The other thing that's important about Starbucks is that it's, when you go there, you know what you're going to get almost all the time. But it's also a very geographic market. So if the best cup of coffee in the world is in Seattle, we're not going to drive there to get it. Okay, so there's a geographic factor in it. So it's getting high quality with known ingredients close to where you live. And that's one of the things they want. Now Starbucks says they want the Starbucks stores to be the third place you really like. Your office, where you live, and Starbucks. How many of you think that's going to work? I don't know. It might work, but the real question is it going to be part of the 3 places I like to go all the time? It's a different question. Other things. So FedEx. When it first came out, the first tagline they had was, when it absolutely positively has to get there. That evolved into the world on time. They now have integrated forward and own all sorts of office supply places all over the globe. So it's your office wherever you wish to be. One of the acid tests is, if you take your positioning, just cut and paste the whole thing into Google and search on it. And if it takes you to IBM's website, you have a big problem. Okay, so, and I do that a lot. It's like somebody gives me their positioning. If I can find a whole bunch of other companies which are exactly the same, it means that it's not differentiated enough. There's no compelling reason to buy. The value proposition isn't clear. I'm going to actually, Stephen is here. So you're going to do pricing, so I'm going to skip over this. So, and then the final thing I'm going to close with is product marketing, metrics and analytics. There's a whole bunch of great tools out there, and they change all the time. This list is a little bit old, but there's all sorts of things you can do, and you can understand a lot of the different pieces that are there. There's a really neat book you can still get from HubSpot. And the key thing for a lot of the companies that sell marketing automation is they give away a lot of stuff for free. So go and get the free stuff and then make it a lot easier for yourself to figure things out. So this book, they've sold a bunch of copies. All right, folks, how many of you check your Google Analytics? How often do you do that? Daily? Who does it daily? Okay, he does, that's good. Weekly? Monthly? How many of you don't know how to do that? Okay, so you need to actually monitor this. It makes a difference. Okay, it really does it's what's an interesting thing. So the sailing school, when's the buying season? What do you think? When do people show up and want to pay for courses? We'll say up for them, for adults and then for kids. For kids, when's the buying season? What do you think? Spring break? You get a gold star. It is spring break. Everybody is sitting there going, my kids are here for right now, hanging around the house, driving me insane. I got to find somewhere to put them during the summer. Okay, so there's a spring break is one. So it turns out that March and May are the two main months for children's classes. What about adults? When? No, it's actually 3 weeks beforehand. They want to know what the weather's going to be like. Like, forget it. I want to know whether it's going to be warm out there. Okay, so, but you're close. But we always thought that, for example, it was way closer to the sailing season than it really is. So one year we decided we'll actually open up our website just before Christmas to see what happens. And we're playing with it one day, and my partner turned it on. We're still trying to figure out how to do different things. We put up the inventory. Somebody bought within 5 minutes. We're sitting there, what was that? And somebody bought a class. Right away, we're like, oh, how could we be so stupid? Some people plan ahead way more than we do. Yeah. So social media marketing, I won't give you some statistics. I think others will talk about that more. But it is more and more important. And again, it has to be consistent. Final question or two, just as we close. How many of you have a product that sells itself? Okay, occasionally. But if you have a marketing budget, you can do far better. Okay? So the real thing is, it's like you have to build your product and roll it out knowing how you're actually going to market it and how you're going to create awareness. So when you go to Web Summit, there's going to be so many companies there. If you do the same thing as everybody else, you have a problem. You have to figure out how to create awareness and stuff. Remember a few things about market segmentation. Final question here. How many segments will you target initially? Who's got 1? 2? 3? Greater than 3. Good, no hands. You have to sit in the corner if you have more than 3. Okay, because it's not good. You can't do that if you're a super early stage company. Who's going to website? To Web Summit? How many are signed up already? Okay, how about considering going? I'll attend if you can keep the cost low. Oh, you guys have lots of money, that's great. Not really all that aware. Okay, and maybe it's not for my type of company. Okay, Web Summit's doing well. The perception is good. And there's some reading material, and then that's how you can get hold of myself and Lesley. Thanks, Angie.